It's amazing how social media has evolved right before all our eyes, and love it or hate it, because of this evolution in communication, the world has become more connected than ever before. While it may not always feel like it, because we are so connected, the world has actually become a safer place to live in, one post at a time. Today, armed with nothing but a computer, an internet connection, and of course time, more and more crimes are being solved with the help of web sleuths and armchair detectives, people just like you and me. And today's list are some very cool examples of just that. I'm Andy Fitzgerald, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please hook us up with a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, so we can bring you the best in true crime news and videos each and every week. Thanks so much for all the support, guys. It's much appreciated. And now, on to today's episode. Here are 5 unbelievable instances where Twitter helped solve the crime. Number 5. Lindo Keefe. Thinking outside the box is a phrase that is more than just a business cliche. It means that we approach problems in new and innovative ways, just like what this police department did in order to solve a cold case. This all began on July 6, 1973. A girl named Lindo Keefe attended summer school at the Lincoln Intermediate School in Corona Del Mar, California. The 11-year-old would typically ride her bike to school, but on this day, she got a ride from a teacher. After class, the young girl decided to call her mother from the school office. She begged her mom for a ride back home, but she couldn't do it at the moment. Linda left the office and sat on the curb in front of her school for a while before she eventually decided to just walk back. It was already in the afternoon when witnesses saw the girl talking to a man in a turquoise van. Linda's mother began to worry when she hadn't returned home. After calling every person whom the schoolgirl could possibly be with, Mrs. O'Keefe decided to call the police. An intensive search for the missing girl then ensued, and the following day, a biker found Linda's lifeless body abandoned along a hiking trail. The subsequent investigation determined that the victim had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. Her kidnapping and death sent a shockwave to the little town of Corona Del Mar. While police were hunting for the killer, Linda's family, relatives, and friends also looked everywhere for that turquoise van. But just like the cops, they couldn't find anything. Meanwhile, the Newport Beach Police Department collected swabs of the perpetrator's semen from the victim's body and preserved it, hoping that future forensic technology would be able to make use of it. 45 years had passed since the case went cold, and then a new development came up. With the help of paraben nanolabs, authorities were able to come up with the suspect's profile in October of 2017. With this information, the Newport Beach Police came up with a plan on how to tap the help from the general public. They thought that instead of just laying out the details of the case, they would opt to make the victim the narrator of her own harrowing last moments of life and death. They chose Twitter as a broadcasting platform, and they called the trend @LindaStory. In a series of tweets, law enforcement shared everything about the case, including a composite sketch of who was supposed to be the perpetrator. The social media campaign caught fire, and it gained massive attention, and then tips and leads of his whereabouts came pouring in from different sources all over the country. Eventually, the all-out effort led to the arrest of James Neal of Monument, Colorado on February 19, 2019. Neal had changed his name years prior from James Layton after he moved out of California. In July of 2020, the 73-year-old succumbed to a disease and died while awaiting trial for the rape and murder case. Neal's untimely passing may have robbed the O'Keefe family of the justice they deserve, but nonetheless, the case has recognized the power of the internet in helping solve cold cases. Number 4. Sean Powers' robbery. What was once thought to be luxury items, laptops and computers, have surely become a necessity in modern times. Online banking, email correspondence, shopping, storing files, and watching videos, these are just but some of their many uses. Thinking that since they're always with us, we often feel like there's no need to install precautionary measures to protect our devices. However, when Sean Power, a famed writer from Canada, had his laptop stolen, he's glad that he had taken the necessary steps to ensure his possessions. In May of 2011, Powers' bag was stolen in Manhattan, New York. It contained no less than a 17-inch MacBook Pro, as well as his personal documents like birth certificate, health card, and smartphone. Thankfully, he had installed Prey. Prey is a free open-source program that tracks computers. The software automatically turned on as soon as the thief fired up the device. The culprit's information was even revealed when the person made the mistake of signing onto his Skype account. Power immediately took to Twitter to ask for help in locating the thief, and it didn't take long for users to track down the crook. They also found out that the person is a co-owner of a restaurant wherein the MacBook was traced. Not wanting to make a big fuss, the victim called the New York Police Department to report the incident. However, he was already in Canada, and he needed to file it personally, which apparently he couldn't do. Meanwhile, some Twitter folks decided to show up at the bar called Oficina Latina to observe the perpetrator up close. When he realized that the police wouldn't be able to help him out, Power opted to call the thief himself. Considering that his identity had already been passed around the internet, and it even included a photo of himself using the stolen computer, the man decided to give up the laptop and the rest of the belongings. He gave it up to the people who volunteered to monitor the thief's activities. So, lesson learned. As we become more mobile, it has also become more crucial for us to protect our personal information and safeguard the gadgets that we carry. And if you're a thief, you better be aware of it. Number 3. Assault on Zachary Hess and Andy Hout. Despite the already decades worth of progress, members of the LGBTQ community, not only across the country but also around the world, are still experiencing acts of violence. In fact, the FBI said that hate crimes against LGBTQ people have been on a slight rise over recent years, and this harrowing story is just but one of them. Andrew Hout and his partner, Zachary Hess, were just walking along Center City in Philadelphia on September 11, 2014. The crowd that evening was quite a bit thick, and while they weren't the majority, there certainly were a number of so-called young, clean-cut drunks loitering around the fun fair. Some of them began to taunt Hout and Hess as the pair walked past. One of the bystanders even went on to ask Hess if his companion was his boyfriend, to which he confirmed. And just like that, the physical altercation began. The 28-year-old was then allegedly pushed by the person who asked him. He pushed back, not wanting any trouble. Hout decided to intervene, but a man pushed him away as they screamed homophobic slurs at him. His glasses got lost in the pandemonium, and suddenly one of the perpetrators punched him straight across his jaw and followed it up with a flurry of punches to the face. Hout ended up losing consciousness right there on the street. A doctor would later testify that the victim suffered multiple fractures running across his jaw, on his cheekbones, and on the side of his right eye. They also had to wire the patient's jaw shut with 16 screws measuring about 7 millimeters each. In the midst of the chaos, someone also stole Hout's wallet, and that was never recovered. The brutal attacks drew national attention, and online sleuths jumped onto the cause to identify those responsible for the assault. One Twitter user shared on the platform what appears to be surveillance footage that captured the entire fiasco. Others helped by spreading the photos of the supposed assailants. As a result, the police were able to track down the suspects, namely 26-year-old Kevin Harrigan, 24-year-old Philip Williams, and 24-year-old Catherine Knott, and the trio were subsequently arrested. Given the statements from the multiple eyewitnesses, photographic evidence, as well as the apparent history of public misbehavior, the three were charged with felony assault and conspiracy charges, among others. It's truly disheartening for us to realize that while the world strives for unity and peace between countries, we ourselves still can't seem to understand and even outwardly despise the happiness of others. Number 2. Steubenville High School Rape Case. On August 11, 2012, a 16-year-old girl from Weirton, West Virginia, went out to attend a party with the players of the Steubenville High School football team. She reportedly had a few drinks before she started feeling funny. The alcohol made her act differently than she normally would. Then came a point when Trent Mays, a high school football player, invited the tipsy girl to go to another party. It just so happened that she was smitten with the athlete, and so she let the 16-year-old boy take her away. She left with Mays and 3 other football players, and as soon as they arrived at the second party, witnesses saw the reveler appearing out of it. She was vomiting, and her movement seemed disoriented. She and her companions then left half an hour later and went to another house. During that ride to the venue, the girl's shirt was then removed. The male passengers then grabbed their phones and started to take photos and videos while their breasts were exposed. Mays then sexually assaulted the nearly unconscious female passenger, and the act was filmed as well. She was then taken to the basement, where another footballer named Malik Richmond stripped her fully naked. Richmond also sexually assaulted the victim while being filmed and photographed, and the other witnesses went on to share the images and videos with their other friends outside of the crime scene. The next morning, the girl we now call Jane Doe woke up to find herself naked and surrounded by 3 boys. She got up, got dressed, but she couldn't find her underwear. Mays and Richmond later dropped her off at her house, but as soon as she got out, the two began to yell at her with mocking words she couldn't make sense of. It was when she arrived home, though, that she started to find out the heinous acts committed by her companions. Apparently, they'd shared it all over Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and pictures and videos of her being molested by Mays and Richmond were everywhere. Details of the sexual assault further went public when a social media user reposted tweets and Facebook posts about the rape. The poster's motive was only to condone and make everyone aware of the crime. This consequently grabbed the country's attention when other users went on to share that information. Aside from the awareness, the harrowing incident also paved way for various concerned groups to raise the issue of rape culture in high schools across the U.S. Later on, Richmond and Mays were positively ID'd as perpetrators and eventually convicted in juvenile court for the rape of a minor and possession of child pornography. Adults, including select school officials, were meanwhile charged with hindering the investigation. It turned out that they had tried to cover up the controversy because the boys were such stellar athletes. This case had everyone realize the disturbing fact that most times, rapists are often those people whom the victims know, rather than that of a stranger lurking in the shadows. Number 1. Killing of Mike Pimentel. The thing about cold cases is that they can either be devoid of essential details or be extremely swamped with information. What this police investigator did was quite remarkable in a way that he provided leads that were enough for the public to actually work on the case. This all began during an incident in Liberty Village, Toronto. It was the New Year's Day of 2012, and Mike Pimentel was reportedly on his way back to his apartment. But he never made it home. Witnesses saw the 24-year-old laying on the street lifeless and swimming in a pool of his own blood. The subsequent medical examination determined that the victim had been stabbed 9 times. An investigation occurred, and despite the considerable number of people present in the area during that time, no one could particularly point out the ones responsible for the killing. Eventually, then, the case went cold. A few years later, a Toronto homicide detective decided to use the power of social media to search for the perpetrator. What he did was quite different, because instead of providing the entire details of the crime, the police officer shared clues that they got one by one in a serial manner. He used the hashtags Mike Pimentel murder and serial. The first evidence presented was a screenshot of a surveillance video showing a woman who seemed to be in a hurry. The following week, the cop posted on Twitter photos of a blood-stained hair extension, black high-heeled shoes, and a set of keys. The clues came pouring in over the next few weeks and months. Meanwhile, the public clamored over the slate of information presented. At a later press conference, the Toronto police officer admitted receiving tons of leads coming from people who claimed knowledge of the culprits. Luckily, they know how to weed out the significant ones from the duds. So in December of 2015, authorities confirmed that they had finally arrested a man named Sean Poirier of Calgary on second-degree murder charges. A woman, whose identity was not revealed, was also reportedly being questioned for her suspected involvement in the incident. Due to some legal reasons, the Toronto PD cannot fully disclose as to what particular tip had led to the suspect's arrest. What's important is that our law enforcers have now recognized the fact that a simple Twitter post surely can help crack even the most unsolvable cold case. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Remember to go check out some more of our content. And if you want an exclusive library of the creepiest videos that we have, go check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/scarymysteries and show us some love. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.